"You shall not pass, human," the alien girl growled while riding the beast. The biting wind howled across the frozen plains of Crystallos, carrying with it particles of ice that sparkled like diamonds in the pale light of the twin moons. Commander Patrick Stone stood unflinching before the massive gates of Frostspire, the sacred city of the crystalline warriors. His battle-worn armor, bearing the scars of countless conflicts, seemed almost mundane compared to the ethereal beauty of the city's crystalline walls. "You shall not pass, human male." The voice that rang out was clear and sharp as winter itself. Atop a massive beast that appeared to be carved from living ice, sat a figure that made Patrick pause, if only for a moment. She was breathtaking in the most literal sense. A warrior queen whose very presence seemed to steal the air from his lungs. Her straight white hair whipped around her like a blizzard, framing a face that could have been carved from the finest alabaster. Her skin held an icy blue undertone that marked her as one of the crystalline people. But it was her eyes that truly captured his attention. They blazed with an inner light that put the auroras above to shame. "I am Nadara, first blade of the crystalline warriors," she announced, her crystalline spear pulsing with azure energy as she leveled it at his chest. The beast beneath her, a massive predator that seemed to be made of living snow and ice, growled low, its eyes burning with the same fierce light as its riders. Patrick didn't flinch. Instead, he allowed himself a small smirk, one that had infuriated countless opponents across a dozen worlds. "I'm here on behalf of the Terran Alliance. Your people requested negotiations." "Negotiations?" Nadara's laugh was like breaking ice. "The elders may have requested talks, but you'll find, human, that we have our traditions. None may enter Frostspire without proving their worth." The beast beneath her, which Patrick now recognized as a frost stalker, one of the deadliest predators in this sector, took a menacing step forward. Its fangs, each the length of his forearm, gleamed in the moonlight. "Fear is not something I know," Patrick replied, his voice carrying just enough edge of amusement to be irritating. "I don't fear death, only boredom. So tell me, First Blade, what sort of proof do you require?" For the first time, he saw uncertainty flicker across Nadara's features. The humans she had encountered before had either backed down or shown fear. This one was different. "3 trial," she declared, regaining her composure. "Combat, endurance, and wisdom. Fail any, and you leave. Succeed." She paused, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Succeed, and perhaps we'll see if humans are truly worthy of treating with the crystalline warriors." Patrick stepped forward, his boots crunching in the snow. "And if I exceed your expectations, then you'll be the first," she replied. But there was something in her tone, a hint of hope perhaps, that suggested she might not be entirely opposed to the idea. The frost stalker growled again, but Patrick noticed it was more curious than threatening now. These creatures were said to be excellent judges of character, and this one seemed interested. "Well then, First Blade," Patrick said, performing an elaborate bow that somehow managed to be both respectful and slightly mocking. "Shall we begin? I'd hate to keep you out in this lovely weather all day." Nadara's eyes narrowed, but he caught the slight upturn of her lips. "Very well, human. Your first trial begins now." She raised her spear, and the crystal tip flared with blinding light. "Show me how well you dance." Patrick's hand dropped to his sword hilt, his grin widening. This, he thought, was going to be far more interesting than standard diplomatic negotiations. The combat arena of Frostspire was a marvel of crystalline architecture, its translucent walls refracting the light of the twin moons into mesmerizing patterns. Patrick stood at one end, his boots finding purchase on the surprisingly grippy ice floor. Across from him, Nadara had dismounted her frost stalker, which now watched from the sidelines with intelligent, calculating eyes. "The rules are simple," Nadara announced, her voice carrying across the arena. "First blood or yield. No killing blows." She paused, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "Though accidents do happen." Patrick drew his sword, the plasma edge humming to life with a soft blue glow that matched the pulsing energy of her crystal spear. "Ladies first," he offered with an exaggerated bow. Her response was immediate and deadly. The spear became a blur of motion as she crossed the distance between them in a heartbeat. Patrick barely had time to bring his sword up to deflect the thrust, the weapons connecting with a shower of sparks that painted the ice in rainbow hues. "Not bad," he grinned, countering with a series of quick strikes that forced her to give ground. "But you telegraph your left side. Do I?" Nidara's response was a fluid combination of moves that nearly took his head off. "Perhaps you should pay less attention to my form and more to staying alive." Their dance continued, neither gaining a clear advantage. Patrick found himself admiring the way she moved, each action precise, efficient, yet somehow graceful. Her fighting style was unlike anything he'd encountered before, a blend of traditional martial arts and something entirely alien. "You're holding back," she accused during a brief pause in their exchange. "So are you," he countered, noting how her eyes widened slightly at his observation. "Afraid of damaging the merchandise?" Her laugh was unexpected and genuine. "Worried about your ego, human?" "Patrick," he corrected, launching into a complex attack pattern. "If we're going to dance, we might as well be on a first-name basis." Their weapons clashed again, but this time they ended up close, very close. For a moment, they were face to face. Their weapons locked between them. Patrick could see the individual snowflake patterns in her irises, could feel the cool breath on his face. "Patrick," she tested the name, and something in her tone made his pulse quicken. "Show me what you can really do." The next phase of their combat was nothing short of spectacular. They moved across the arena like partners in an elaborate dance, each attack flowing seamlessly into the next. Where Patrick was power and precision, Nidara was grace and fluidity. Their styles shouldn't have complemented each other, yet somehow they did. "Your technique," she commented during another close exchange, "it's not standard human military training." "I've had some interesting teacher," he replied, executing a move that forced her to perform an impressive backflip to avoid it, including a monk on New Tibet who insisted I learn ballet. "Ballet? Human dance form. Very disciplined. Very elegant." He demonstrated with a spinning attack that would have made his old instructor proud. "Much like your own style." Their combat had drawn a crowd. Warriors of the crystalline people gathered around the arena's edges, watching in fascination as Human and First Blade continued their deadly dance. But Patrick barely noticed them. His entire world had narrowed to the woman before him, to the way she moved, the flash in her eyes, the slight smile that appeared whenever he surprised her with a particularly clever move. The end came suddenly. They were locked in another close exchange when Patrick executed a complex disarming technique. At the same instant, Nidara performed a sweep that should have taken his legs out from under him. Instead of fighting it, he went with the motion, turning what should have been a fall into a controlled roll that brought him up behind her. When the dust settled, they found themselves in a stalemate, his sword at her throat, her spear pointed at his heart, their bodies pressed together in what could have been either a killing embrace or something far more intimate. "Draw," he suggested, very aware of how her body felt against his. "Draw," she agreed, her voice husky. Neither of them moved immediately. When they finally separated, there was a tension in the air that had nothing to do with combat. The watching warriors burst into applause, but Patrick noticed Nidara's eyes hadn't left his. "You fight well, Patrick of Earth," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that hadn't been there before. "But this was only the first trial." "Looking forward to the next one," he replied, noting how her eyes lingered on the way the combat had left his shirt clinging to his chest. "Though perhaps we could continue this discussion over dinner." "Dinner?" She raised an eyebrow. "That's not part of the trials. Consider it diplomatic relations." Her laugh was like crystal chimes in the wind. "Very well, diplomat. Show me how humans celebrate after combat." As they left the arena together, Patrick caught the knowing looks exchanged by the watching warriors. Clearly, this wasn't standard protocol, but then again, nothing about this mission was turning out to be standard. The Frost Stalker followed them, and Patrick could have sworn the beast was amused. The Grand Hall of Frostspire shimmered like a frozen dream, its towering crystal columns reflecting the starlight that poured through the transparent dome above. Patrick adjusted the formal attire provided to him. A deep blue tunic with silver threading that mimicked the intricate patterns of frost, noting how the crystalline people's attention to detail extended even to diplomatic fashion. News of his combat trial with Nidara had spread through the city's political circles with remarkable speed. The Council of Elders had officially requested his presence at what was supposed to be a formal diplomatic dinner. though the underlying currents suggested far more complex motivations. Commander Stone, a distinguished male crystalline with elaborate facial markings, approached, flanked by several council members. "I am High Elder Frost. Your performance today was most impressive." "High Elder," Patrick bowed with diplomatic precision. "I hope I haven't disrupted any sacred traditions by accepting the First Blade's challenge?" "On the contrary," a female elder interjected, her eyes gleaming with interest. "It's been quite some time since anyone has matched Nadara in combat. The fact that a human did so has generated considerable discussion among our people." The hall suddenly fell silent. Patrick turned to see Nadara entering, and for a moment, he forgot how to breathe. She wore what appeared to be living crystal, a dress that flowed like liquid starlight with every movement. Her white hair was adorned with glowing crystal beads that caught the light, making her seem almost ethereal. Their eyes met across the space, and the temperature in the room seemed to shift despite Frostspire's eternal chill. "First Blade," High Elder Frost called out, "join us. We were discussing your remarkable combat display with Commander Stone." Nadara moved with the same fluid grace she'd shown in combat, approaching their group. "I trust you found our traditional greeting educational, Commander?" Her voice carried a playful undertone that made Patrick's pulse quicken. "Educational isn't quite the word I'd choose," he replied with a slight smirk. "Exhilarating, perhaps." The dinner that followed was an elaborate affair, with exotic dishes that challenged human palates and crystalline delicacies that seemed to dance with light. Patrick found himself seated beside Nadara, close enough to feel the cool aura that naturally emanated from her people. Throughout the meal, political discussions swirled around them like snowflakes in a storm. The Terran Alliance's recent expansion had not gone unnoticed by the crystalline leadership, and their questions about human military capabilities were thinly veiled beneath diplomatic courtesy. "Your combat style," Nadara murmured during a lull in the political discourse, "it's unlike anything in our records of human warfare." "I've had unique teachers," he replied, keeping his voice low and intimate. "I could show you some techniques, privately." "Could you?" Her eyes flickered with something that made his breath catch. "And what would such private instruction entail?" "Cultural exchange," he suggested, feeling her foot brush against his under the table. "For diplomatic purposes, of course." "Of course," she agreed, her voice carrying a hint of promise that had nothing to do with combat training. The political implications of their obvious attraction didn't go unnoticed. Patrick caught several elders exchanging meaningful glances, while others seemed to be actively calculating the diplomatic advantages of a potential alliance strengthened by personal bonds. As the evening progressed, the conversation turned to more serious matters. The Crystalline Council expressed concerns about the growing instability in their sector of space, while human diplomatic channels buzzed with updates about the unprecedented reception their envoy was receiving. "Perhaps," Nadara suggested as the formal dinner began to wind down, "Commander Stone would appreciate a tour of our crystal gardens. They're particularly stunning under the twin moons." Several elders exchanged knowing looks, but none objected. The political implications of their growing connection were clear to everyone present, yet the potential benefits seemed to outweigh any traditional reservations. The crystal gardens were indeed beautiful, but Patrick found his attention drawn more to his companion than the surroundings. They walked in comfortable silence until reaching a secluded alcove formed by towering crystal formations. "Your people seem very interested in human military capabilities," Patrick observed, watching how the starlight played across her features. "And your people seem very interested in our crystal technology," she countered, stepping closer. "Yet here we are, discussing neither." The air between them crackled with tension. "Here we are," he agreed, his hand rising to trace the crystalline patterns that seemed to dance across her skin. "Any other diplomatic matters we should address?" "Several," she breathed, her cool fingers sliding up his chest. "But they can wait." Their first kiss was like a fusion reaction, hot and cold, soft and hard, alien yet perfectly natural. Patrick pulled her closer, reveling in the contrast between her cool skin and his human warmth. Their bodies fit together as perfectly as they had during their combat dance, but this was a very different kind of dance. "Your quarters or mine?" he murmured against her lips. Mine, she decided. Unless you're concerned about diplomatic protocol. Fear is not something I know, he reminded her, earning a laugh that quickly turned into another searing kiss. The night that followed transcended cultural barriers and species differences, as primal instincts prove universal across the cosmos. Their passion burned hot against the eternal cold of Frostspire, a perfect balance of opposing forces finding harmony. Morning brought new challenges as Patrick woke to find messages from both the Terran Alliance and the Crystalline Council awaiting his attention. The political machinery never slept, even when its operators did. Beside him, Nidara stirred, her pale skin almost luminescent in the early light. Your communication device has been chiming for the past hour, she murmured, tracing patterns on his chest. It seems our diplomatic relations have caused quite a stir. Let them stir, he replied, pulling her closer. Sometimes the best negotiations happen without words. She laughed, the sound like crystal wind chimes. Is that the official Terran Alliance position? It's my position, and I'm the one they sent to negotiate. His fingers traced the curve of her spine, marveling at how her skin seemed to shimmer under his touch. The Council will expect a formal statement about our cultural exchange, she said, though she made no move to leave the warmth of their shared space. And what should we tell them? That humans are full of surprises, she replied with a wicked smile, and that perhaps we underestimated your species' capacity for diplomatic relations. A knock at the door interrupted their morning banter. An attendant's voice called through the crystal barrier. First Blade, the Council requests your immediate presence. Commander Stone's presence is also required. They exchanged knowing looks. The political game was about to begin in earnest. Ready to face the music? Patrick asked, reaching for his formal attire. Always, Nidara replied, her confidence as striking as ever. Though I must admit, I'm looking forward to our next, combat training session. As they prepared to face the day and its political challenges, Patrick reflected on how quickly things had evolved from their first confrontation at the city gates. From, you shall not pass, to sharing intimate moments. It was a diplomatic success story for the ages, though perhaps not the kind that would make it into official reports. The morning council chamber buzzed with tension as Patrick and Nidara stood before the assembled leadership of both their peoples. The Terran diplomatic delegation had arrived via emergency transport, their presence adding another layer of complexity to an already delicate situation. Ambassador Edward Simmons, a veteran of countless interspecies negotiations, fixed Patrick with a look that mixed exasperation and grudging admiration. Commander Stone, when we sent you to establish diplomatic relations, this wasn't quite what we had in mind. With all due respect, Ambassador, Patrick replied, standing tall in his formal attire, I believe I've made more progress in understanding crystalline culture than any previous envoy. Several of the crystalline elders made sounds that might have been suppressed laughter. Nidara, resplendent in her ceremonial armor, stood beside him with perfect poise, though Patrick could detect the slight curl of amusement at the corner of her mouth. High Elder Frost cleared his throat. The matter at hand is not just about diplomatic relations. Commander Stone has begun the traditional trials. By our laws, they must be completed. The second trial awaits, Nidara announced, her voice carrying that edge of challenge that had first captured Patrick's attention. A test of wisdom and endurance in the Crystal Caverns. Ambassador Simmons leaned forward. Surely, given the circumstances, we could waive these traditional requirements. Waive them? A younger Crystalline Council member named Frostheart stood abruptly. First, this human takes liberties with our first blade, and now you suggest we abandon our sacred traditions? Patrick felt Nidara tense beside him. Before she could respond, he stepped forward. I began these trials of my own free will, and I intend to complete them, not just for diplomatic relations, but because I respect your traditions at... He glanced at Nidara. Your people. The chamber fell silent. Even Frostheart seemed taken aback by the sincerity in his voice. The Crystal Caverns test awaits, Nidara declared, breaking the tension. Unless anyone else wishes to question our traditions? The challenge in her voice was clear. No one spoke. As they prepared to leave for the caverns, Ambassador Simmons pulled Patrick aside. The Alliance is concerned about the nature of your relationship with the First Blade? The Alliance should be thrilled, Patrick countered. We've achieved more genuine cultural understanding in the past day than in years of formal negotiations. Understanding isn't the word the council used in their report, Simmons muttered, but there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. The crystal caverns lived up to their name, a vast network of underground chambers where crystal formations created natural mazes and challenges. Nidara's Frost Stalker, which had been watching Patrick with increasing interest since their first encounter, followed them into the depths. The test is simple, Nidara explained as they reached a central chamber. You must navigate the crystal maze, following the Song of the Crystals to find your way out. Each wrong turn triggers crystal guardians. And you'll be watching my progress? From a special observation chamber, she confirmed, then added in a lower voice, though I might be persuaded to offer private guidance later. The political representatives from both sides had gathered in viewing galleries above the maze. Patrick could feel their eyes on him as he prepared to enter. Any last advice? He asked Nidara. She stepped close, adjusting his protective gear with unnecessary thoroughness. Trust your instincts, she murmured. The crystals respond to more than just logic. They respond to passion. The way she said passion made his blood heat despite the cavern's chill. Like you do, he whispered back, earning a smile that promised future delights. Prove yourself worthy in this trial, she breathed against his ear, and I'll show you just how passionate crystalline warriors can be. The maze proved to be as challenging as promised. The crystal formations sang with otherworldly tones, creating a symphony that had to be interpreted correctly to find the true path. Each wrong turn awakened crystal guardians, constructs that tested both his combat skills and his ability to think strategically. But Patrick found himself drawing on unexpected resources. The rhythm of the crystal song reminded him of Nidara's movements in combat, of the way their bodies had moved together in more intimate moments. He began to understand that the maze wasn't just about finding the right path, it was about finding harmony between logic and instinct, between thought and feeling. Above, the political delegates watched in amazement as he navigated challenges that had stumped many previous participants. The Terran representatives began to see why the crystalline people put such stock in these trials, while the crystalline elders were forced to acknowledge that perhaps humans possessed depths they hadn't recognized. As Patrick progressed deeper into the maze, the challenges became more complex. The crystal guardians no longer attacked singly, but in coordinated patterns that required both physical prowess and tactical thinking to overcome. Yet each victory seemed to resonate with the very crystals themselves, creating harmonies that guided his way forward. From her observation point, Nidara watched with growing admiration. Unlike previous challengers who approached the maze with either pure logic or brute force, Patrick seemed to dance with the challenges, adapting and flowing like water through ice. His movements reminded her of their intimate dance the night before, that perfect blend of strength and grace that had drawn her to him. Remarkable, High Elder, Frost murmured beside her. He moves as though born to our ways. Humans are more adaptable than we imagine, Nidara replied, unable to keep the pride from her voice. They feel deeply, yet think clearly. Fight fiercely, yet show mercy. Love passionately, yet remain strong. The final chamber presented the greatest challenge, a vast space where crystal formations created an ever-shifting landscape. Here, Patrick faced not just her crystal guardians, but the very environment itself, as platforms moved and reformed, requiring split-second decisions and perfect timing. To everyone's surprise, including Nidara's, Patrick began to laugh as he navigated the chaos. There was pure joy in his movements, in celebration of the challenge itself that resonated with the warrior spirit of the crystalline people. Even Frostheart, watching from above, found himself nodding in reluctant approval. When Patrick finally emerged from the maze, his victory was unprecedented, not just in completing the challenge, but in the way he had done it. The crystals themselves seemed to sing in harmony with his presence, a phenomenon that had never been recorded before. Nidara met him at the exit, protocol forgotten as she pulled him into a fierce embrace. "You continue to surprise me, human," she whispered against his neck. "Good," he replied, holding her close despite their audience. "I'd hate to become predictable." The political implications of his success rippled through both delegations. Ambassador Simmons was already composing messages to the Alliance about the potential for deeper cultural exchange programs, while the crystalline elders huddled in intense discussion about the implications of a human mastering their sacred trials. That evening, a celebration was held in the Grand Hall, though the formal atmosphere of the previous night had given way to something more genuine. Warriors and diplomats mingled freely, sharing stories and comparing cultural traditions. Patrick found himself at the center of it all, with Nidara by his side, fielding questions about his experience in the maze. "The third trial awaits tomorrow," Nidara announced as they finally managed to steal a moment alone in a quiet alcove. "Are you prepared?" "For anything," he assured her, pulling her closer. "Though I hope it doesn't involve more mazes. I prefer my challenges more straightforward." Her laugh was rich with promise. "Oh, it's very straightforward. A test of spirit and will that no human has ever attempted." "Sounds perfect," he murmured, his lips finding that sensitive spot below her ear that he'd discovered the night before. "But for now, I believe we have some cultural exchange to continue." They slipped away from the celebration, ignoring the knowing looks and diplomatic smirks. Politics, trials, and protocol could wait. Some things transcended cultural boundaries in diplomatic relations. Dawn broke over Frostspire with unusual warmth, as if the twin suns themselves acknowledged the significance of the day. Patrick stood at the highest point of the Crystal City, where the final trial would take place. The entire diplomatic contingent from both Earth and the crystalline people gathered to witness this unprecedented moment. The arena for the final trial was unlike anything Patrick had seen before. A platform of pure crystal suspended between three towering spires, with nothing but the endless drop of Frostspire's mountain beneath. The morning light fractured through the crystal surface, creating a dazzling display that almost obscured the deadly nature of the challenge. "The final trial is simple," Nidara announced, her voice carrying across the platform. She sat astride her Froststalker, every bit as magnificent as when they'd first met. But now her eyes held something more than just challenge when they met his. "You must tame a Froststalker of your own." A murmur ran through the crowd. Even Ambassador Simmons, usually unflappable, looked concerned. "Commander Stone, this goes beyond diplomatic duties. No human has ever completed the first two trials either," Patrick interrupted, his eyes locked with Nidara's. "What are the rules?" "The beast must choose you," she explained, running her hand along her own mount's crystalline fur. "You cannot force it, cannot trick it. The bond must be genuine." From a lower platform, a massive Froststalker was released onto the arena. It was larger than Nidara's mount, its fur shimmering with patterns of frost, its eyes burning with that characteristic blue fire. The beast circled the platform, sizing up Patrick with predatory intelligence. "Remember," Nidara added softly, "they respond to strength, but also to spirit. Show no fear." "Fear is not something I know," Patrick completed their now familiar exchange, earning a smile that made his heart race despite the danger before him. The political implications of this moment weren't lost on anyone. Success would mean more than just completing the trials. It would demonstrate that humans could truly understand and adapt to crystalline ways. Failure would be rather final, given the beast's impressive fangs. Patrick stepped forward, removing his protective gear until he stood in simple clothing. The Froststalker growled, its breath creating clouds of crystalline frost in the air. Behind him, he heard several diplomats gasp, but his focus remained entirely on the creature before him. "You remind me of someone," he said conversationally to the beast, thinking of Nidara's first challenge. "Proud, powerful, probably thinking I'm not worthy of your time." The Froststalker's ears twitched, its growl taking on a curious note. "But you know what?" Patrick continued, taking another step forward. "I've learned something about your people. Strength isn't just about power. It's about understanding, adapting, growing." He extended his hand, palm up, toward the beast. "So let's skip the part where you try to intimidate me and I try to prove myself. We both know how that dance ends." The Froststalker's growl changed to something almost like a chuff of amusement. It padded forward, massive paws silent despite their size, until its muzzle was inches from Patrick's hand. Its breath frosted his skin, but he didn't flinch. "That's right," he murmured. "You're not just a beast of burden or a weapon. You're a warrior like her." He gestured to Nadara's mount, and warriors recognize each other. The Frost Stalker's eyes met his, that burning blue gaze seeming to peer into his very soul. Then, to the amazement of all watching, it pressed its forehead against his palm. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Patrick felt the creature's spirit touch his own. Ancient, proud, but also curious and intelligent. Images flashed through his mind, hunting through crystal forests, soaring between mountain peaks, the joy of running with a pack beneath twin moons. When he opened his eyes, he found himself astride the Frost Stalker's back, as naturally as if he'd been born to it. The beast's powerful muscles rippled beneath him, ready to move as one with his thoughts. Nadara guided her mount alongside his, her eyes shining with pride and something deeper. "You continue to exceed expectations, human." "Patrick," he corrected with a grin, "I think we're well past formalities." The political implications exploded like a supernova. Ambassador Simmons was already speaking rapidly into his communicator, while the crystalline elders huddled in intense discussion. But for Patrick and Nadara, the world had narrowed to just them and their mounts. "Race you to the crystal spires?" she challenged, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Afraid you'll lose?" he countered, feeling his mount's eager response through their newfound bond. They took off across the platform, their Frost Stalkers moving in perfect sync. The beasts leaped from crystal to crystal, their powerful forms navigating the impossible heights with supernatural grace. The wind whipped past them, carrying their laughter across the frozen city. Below, the diplomatic corps watched in amazement as human and crystalline warrior rode together, their movements a dance of perfect harmony. Even the most skeptical observers couldn't deny the beauty of their partnership. When they finally returned to the platform, High Elder Frost stepped forward. "The trials are complete. Commander Stone, you have done what no human before you has achieved. You have proven yourself worthy not just of entering our city, but of being one of us." Patrick dismounted, his hand still resting on his Frost Stalker's neck. "I didn't do this for political gain," he said, his eyes finding Nadara's. "I did it because some things are worth fighting for, worth proving yourself for." Ambassador Simmons cleared his throat. "The Alliance will want to formalize this unprecedented achievement. Perhaps we could discuss the implications." "The implications," Nadara interrupted, dismounting with fluid grace, "are that the barriers between our peoples are not as insurmountable as we once believed." She moved to stand beside Patrick, their shoulders touching. "Perhaps it's time for both sides to reconsider their positions." The political dance that followed was complex, but Patrick found he cared less about the diplomatic implications than the way Nadara's hand had found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. His Frost Stalker nudged his shoulder, radiating approval through their bond. That evening, a grand celebration filled Frostspire. Warriors and diplomats mingled freely, sharing stories and traditions. Patrick found himself at the center of it all, but his attention remained fixed on Nadara, who moved through the crowd with the same deadly grace she showed in combat. They slipped away from the celebration, riding their Frost Stalkers to a private crystal garden high above the city. The twin moons painted everything in ethereal light, making Nadara's skin glow like living crystal. "So," she said, moving into his arms, "what happens now? Warrior of Earth. Now?" He pulled her closer, feeling the perfect fit of their bodies. "Now I think we write our own rules, unless you're still planning to tell me I shall not pass." Her laugh was rich with promise. "I think you've proven yourself worthy of passing anywhere you wish." Her fingers traced the line of his jaw. "Though I might still challenge you, occasionally, to keep things interesting." "I wouldn't have it any other way," he murmured, before capturing her lips in a kiss that spoke of futures yet to come. Their love that night was different. No longer just passion and discovery, but something deeper. Something that spoke of shared challenges overcome, of barriers broken, of two warriors finding in each other something worth fighting for. The next morning, as they stood together watching the sunrise, Patrick felt his Frost Stalker's presence in his mind, sharing images of vast crystal forests and unexplored territories. Beside him, Nadara's mount did the same, the two beasts creating a shared vision of adventures to come. "Ready for the next challenge?" Nadara asked, her eyes glowing with that familiar mix of challenge and affection. "With you." Patrick pulled her close, feeling the rightness of their connection. Always. The Grand Assembly Hall of Frostspire had never witnessed anything quite like this. What should have been a formal diplomatic training session had transformed into something far more entertaining, as Patrick and Nadara demonstrated proper cross-cultural combat techniques to a mixed audience of human and crystalline warriors. "The key to understanding your opponent," Nadara announced, circling Patrick with predatory grace, "is to recognize their patterns." She lunged suddenly, her practiced spear a blur of motion. Patrick deflected the attack with a flourish that was perhaps more showy than necessary. "Like how you always bite your lower lip right before you strike," he countered with a grin, earning a few chuckles from the audience. "I do not," Nadara protested, though her cheeks took on that fascinating icy blue flush that Patrick had come to adore. "Oh, really?" He executed a complex series of moves that brought them close together, their weapons locked. "You're doing it right now." Their faces were inches apart, and Patrick could see the playful spark in her glowing eyes. "Perhaps," she murmured, just loud enough for him to hear, "I'm thinking about biting something else." The suggestive comment nearly cost him his balance, which was exactly what she'd intended. Nadara swept his legs out from under him, but Patrick turned the fall into a roll, coming up behind her. "That's fighting dirty," he accused, unable to keep the admiration from his voice. "All's fair in love and war," she quoted the human phrase he'd taught her, drawing appreciative murmurs from the watching diplomats. Their frost stalkers, watching from the sidelines, seemed to share in their rider's playful mood. Patrick's mount, which he'd named Thunder for its resonant growl, kept nudging Nadara's beast into their path, forcing them to dance around the massive creatures. "Your beasts appear to be conspiring," Ambassador Simmons observed from his seat among the diplomatic corps. "Like riders, like mounts," High Elder Frost replied with unusual humor. The training session continued, but every demonstration seemed to turn into a contest of who could fluster the other more, while maintaining a professional facade. Their movements were a perfect blend of combat efficiency and barely disguised flirtation, teaching their audiences much about partnership as fighting. Later that afternoon, they found themselves in a formal council session discussing the integration of human and crystalline military training programs. Patrick sat opposite Nadara at the crystal table, attempting to focus on the diplomatic proceedings. "The exchange program will require careful coordination," one of the human delegates was saying. "We need to ensure proper protocols are followed." Patrick felt something cool brush against his leg under the table. Looking up, he caught Nadara's innocent expression, though her eyes danced with mischief. "Commander Stone," the delegate prompted, "your thoughts on the protocol?" "I believe," Patrick replied smoothly while playing footsie with a certain first blade under the table, "that hands-on experience is essential." He emphasized hands-on just enough to make Nadara's breath catch. "The more intimate the cultural exchange, the better the understanding between our peoples." "Precisely," Nadara agreed, her foot traveling higher up his leg. "Deep, penetrating knowledge of each other's customs is crucial." Several of the older diplomats seemed oblivious to the subtext, but Ambassador Simmons was developing a suspicious cough. The afternoon session evolved into an elaborate game of subtle provocations. Every formal proposal became an opportunity for double entente. Every diplomatic phrase carried hidden meaning. Their mutual attraction, far from diminishing with familiarity, had only grown more intense, spiced now with playful competition. "Perhaps a demonstration of traditional crystalline greeting customs?" Nadara suggested innocently, rising from her seat. "Commander Stone has become quite proficient." Patrick matched her movement, recognizing the gleam in her eye. "Always happy to demonstrate my skills." The traditional greeting was indeed formal, a complex series of ritualized movements that, when performed properly, resembled a dance more than a salutation. But the way they performed it, each touch lingering just a fraction longer than necessary, transformed it into something else entirely. "Your mastery of our customs is impressive," High Elder Frost commented. though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely fooled by their professional demeanor. "I've had an excellent teacher," Patrick replied, his hand still resting on Nidara's waist from the final position of the greeting. "Though some lessons require private instruction." Their frost stalkers, watching through the crystal windows, made sound suspiciously like laughter. The day's final event was a demonstration of mounted combat techniques. Riding their respective beasts, Patrick and Nidara showed how crystalline and human military tactics could be combined. Their frost stalkers moved in perfect synchronization, their riders executing complex maneuvers that had the watching warriors taking notes. "The key is trust," Nidara explained as Thunder and her mount, Crystal Wind, circled each other. "Between rider and beast, between partners, and between cultures," Patrick added, guiding Thunder into a position that brought him alongside Nidara. "Sometimes the most unlikely combinations prove the most effective." Their demonstration concluded with a spectacular series of synchronized jumps across the training grounds, their frost stalkers moving as one while their riders exchanged playful challenges and flirtatious banter. "Show off," Nidara accused as they dismounted, though her smile betrayed her approval. "You love it," he countered, pulling her close despite their audience. "Perhaps," she admitted, her cool fingers tracing patterns on his chest, "though your dismount could use work. Care to give me some private lessons?" Their intimate moment was interrupted by Ambassador Simmons clearing his throat. "If you two could contain your diplomatic relations for a moment, we have some actual protocols to discuss." The evening found them in Patrick's quarters, reviewing reports from the day's sessions. Or at least that was the official reason. In reality, they were curled together on his balcony, watching the twin moons rise over the crystal spires. "You nearly made me lose my composure in the council chamber," Nidara accused, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "Me?" Patrick feigned innocence. "I was merely demonstrating my dedication to a cultural understanding." "Is that what you call it?" She shifted to face him, her eyes glowing with that mixture of challenge and desire that had first captured his attention. "And what cultural understanding would you like to demonstrate now?" Their kiss was both playful and passionate, a perfect reflection of how their relationship had evolved. What had started as a challenge, "You shall not pass, human male," had transformed into something neither of them had expected, but both now treasured. Thunder and Crystal Wind, watching from their perches on the adjacent platform, exchanged knowing looks. Their riders might think they were being subtle, but the beast knew better. They had recognized the match even before the humans had figured it out themselves. As the night deepened, their playful banter took on a more intimate tone. The formal, diplomatic masks they wore during the day fell away, leaving just Patrick and Nidara, two warriors who had found in each other something worth more than all the political alliances in the galaxy. "You know," Patrick mused, trailing his fingers along the crystalline patterns that seemed to dance across her skin, "when you first challenged me at the gates, I never imagined this would be the outcome." "No!" Nidara's laugh was like crystal wind chimes in a breeze. "And what did you imagine? Human male?" Her impression of her own earlier imperious tone made them both smile. "Well, I considered several possibilities. Death by ice spear, death by frost stalker, death by frostbite." He pretended to count them off on his fingers. "You seem to have been rather fixated on death," she observed, shifting to straddle his lap with warrior's grace. "Yet you showed no fear." "I told you, fear is not something I know." His hands settled naturally on her hips. "Though you do make my heart race in other ways." Their kisses grew more heated but maintained that edge of playful competition that characterized their relationship. Each touch was both a caress and a challenge, each embrace both tender and testing. Through their mental bonds, they could feel their frost stalkers' amused approval. The beasts had their own way of viewing relationships, simpler, more primal, yet in some ways more honest than human or crystalline conventions. A chime from Patrick's communicator interrupted their intimate moment. Ambassador Simmons's voice filled the room. "Commander Stone, a reminder about tomorrow's early strategic planning session?" "Acknowledged, Ambassador," Patrick replied while Nidara muffled her laughter against his neck. "I'll be fully prepared to discuss positions." Just try to maintain diplomatic decorum, Commander. Simmons out. As soon as the communication ended, they both burst out laughing. Poor Simmons, Patrick said. I think we're giving him diplomatic indigestion. He'll survive, Nadar replied, her cool fingers tracing the battle scars on his chest. Though perhaps we should practice those positions he mentioned? For diplomatic purposes, of course. Of course, Patrick agreed solemnly, though his eyes danced with a mischief. We wouldn't want to disappoint the diplomatic corps. Their laughter echoed through the crystal chambers, joined by the rumbling chuffs of their frost stalkers. In that moment, politics and protocols seemed very far away, leaving just them, a human warrior and his crystalline lover, writing their own rules about what was possible between their peoples. The integration ceremony at Frostspire's highest spire marked a historic moment for both species. 1 year had passed since Patrick first stood before the city's gates facing a fierce warrior princess atop her frost stalker. Now, as the twin suns painted the crystal city in hues of gold and azure, he found himself in a very different position. Patrick and Nidara sat astride their respective mounts, Thunder and Crystal Wind overlooking the gathered delegates from both worlds. Their frost stalkers had grown as inseparable as their riders, often communicating in ways that transcended even their mental bonds. Ready to make history, Patrick murmured to Nidara, admiring how her ceremonial armor caught the light. The same armor she'd worn when they first met, though now it bore additional markings denoting her new role as Joint Commander of the Combined Forces. Always, she replied with that smile that still made his heart race. Though I'm still not entirely convinced you should pass. Still holding on to that, are you? He grinned, remembering their first encounter. I thought I'd proven myself worthy by now. Perhaps you need another test. Her eyes glowed with promise rather than challenge now. For thoroughness, of course. Ambassador Simmons' voice interrupted their flirting. If the joint commanders could focus on the ceremony rather than each other. The integration ceremony itself was a blend of both cultures' traditions. Young human recruits paired with crystalline warriors, each learning to respect and understand the other's ways. The highlight was the demonstration of combined combat techniques, with Patrick and Nidra leading their forces in synchronized maneuvers that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Remember, Nidara called out to the trainees, strength isn't just about power. It's about understanding, adapting, growing. She shot Patrick a knowing look. He'd taught her that during their own journey of discovery. Their frost stalkers performed their own intricate dance, showing how the mighty beast could work together with human technology and crystalline traditions. Thunder had learned to channel his natural frost abilities through modified human energy fields, while Crystal Wind had mastered working with human tactical systems. After the formal ceremonies came the celebrations. The crystal halls of Frostspire echoed with music from both worlds, creating an unexpectedly harmonious blend. Warriors and diplomats mingled freely, sharing stories and traditions with genuine interest rather than formal politeness. You've changed everything, High Elder Frost commented to Patrick during the festivities. When you first arrived, many thought you were either mad or foolish. And now? Patrick asked, watching as Nidara demonstrated a traditional human dance move to a group of young crystalline warriors, her natural grace making the alien movements look elegant. Now we understand that humans possess a strength we hadn't recognized, the ability to adapt, to embrace differences, to turn challenges into opportunities. The elder's eyes twinkled. Though I suspect having the right motivation helped. Later that evening, Patrick and Nidar escaped to their private crystal garden, a space that perfectly blended both their cultures. Human plants thrived in specially designed crystal environments, their colors enhanced by the natural properties of the crystalline architecture. Do you remember what you first thought when you saw me? Nidar asked, curled against him as they watched the moon's rise. I thought you were the most beautiful and dangerous thing I'd ever seen, Patrick replied honestly. Still do, actually. Flatterer. But her cool fingers traced patterns on his chest that suggested she appreciated the compliment. I thought you were either the bravest or most foolish human I'd ever encountered. And now? Now I know you're both, she teased, earning a playful growl that turned into something more intimate. Their passion had only grown stronger with time, each encounter still carrying that edge of challenge and discovery that had marked their first meeting. The blend of his natural warmth and her crystal-touched coolness created sensations that defied conventional experience, making each moment together unique and powerful. Through their mental links, they could feel their frost stalker's contentment. Thunder and Crystal Wind had created their own private space on a nearby platform, their massive forms curled together in a way that mirrored their rider's embrace. The integration program is exceeding all expectations, Patrick mused later, running his fingers through Nadara's star-bright hair. Though I suspect it's not just because of our training methods. Oh! She propped herself up on an elbow, her glowing eyes meeting his. What's your theory, Commander? I think, he said, pulling her closer, that once people see it's possible to bridge any gap, to overcome any barrier. He kissed her softly. They stopped being afraid to try. The next morning brought new challenges as they prepared to expand the integration program to other crystalline cities. But now they faced everything together, their partnership stronger for every obstacle they'd overcome. During their morning training session, Patrick watched Nadara demonstrating combat moves to a mixed group of human and crystalline warriors. Her grace and power still took his breath away, but now there was something more, a depth of understanding and connection that transcended their initial attraction. "You're staring," she called out, not even turning to look at him. "Can you blame me?" he replied, making their students laugh. "I'm admiring your technique." "Is that what you're calling it now?" She spun to face him, spirit ready. "Care to demonstrate some techniques of your own?" Their sparring match that followed was as much dance as combat, each movement flowing naturally into the next. The watching warriors saw more than just fighting skills. They saw how two different species could move in perfect harmony, stronger together than apart. That evening, as they stood on the highest spire of Frostspire, watching the stars emerge, Patrick pulled Nadara close. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" "For not letting me pass that first day." He grinned at her surprised look. "If you had, we might never have discovered this." "Well then," she replied, her eyes sparkling with that familiar mix of challenge and love. "Perhaps I should make you prove yourself worthy all over again." "Always," he agreed, capturing her lips in a kiss that promised many more challenges to come. Their love story had become legend in both cultures. The human warrior who refused to show fear, and the crystalline princess who discovered that some barriers were meant to be broken. Their partnership had opened doors that both species had thought forever closed, proving that understanding and acceptance could bridge any gap. As the twin moons rose over Frostspire, their light catching the crystal spires and creating rainbows in the night sky, Patrick and Nadara stood together, their frost stalkers beside them, ready to face whatever new adventures awaited. They had proven that love could transcend species, that strength could be found in differences, and that sometimes the greatest victories came not from passing barriers but from breaking them down altogether.